We assume that pride and prejudice are commonly seen in our society today, and they have been in existence in our world for ages and will never fade.
Pride and prejudice are social values which run parallel with people of our time for a long period, obviously seen in the era of Jane Austen, an English writer who lived between 1725 and 1817. She is the author of the famous love novel Pride and Prejudice, published in 1813. Recently voted the second bestseller book in Britain. The book has caught attention for many filmmakers and writers for decades. Jane Austen intelligently told us the social values she sensed and clearly saw. Then she planted them in many characteristics in her books.
The focus of this documentary is to investigate this assumption that the behaviors of people in our world today are still full of pride and prejudice. Pride and Prejudice, as seen in the book of Jane Austen, will be closely looked to four areas: in social system, gender equality, social rising and marriage in the 19th century in the Regency period in England. Interview technique is selected to survey the attitudes of people in our world today to see whether they still have pride and prejudice as those of the people in the historical past.
Social classes as seen from the book Pride and Prejudice.
England in 19th century has a very strict hierarchy. Social system was divided into four big classes: the upper class, the middle class, the working class, and the poor. The segregation was based on many factors, but mainly on wealth and occupation. In Jane Austen Pride and Prejudice, she only mentioned the upper class, which represented by Mr. Darcy and his family, and the middle class, which are the Bennets. Social difference play an important part in her book. The novel portrays contempt and tension between these two classes. Darcy was depicted as someone who was proud of his family name and dignity or pride. He looked down Elizabeth because she was from a middle-class family and turned out to be like other girls wanted to marry a rich guy, as well as Darcy and Lady Catherine, who was despite Elizabeth and her family and tried to obstruct the marriage between Elizabeth and Darcy. Because of their social difference, Elizabeth showed prejudice against Darcy because of his higher class. Austen depicted some of the characters that placed much importance on their level in the society, such as Mr. Collins, who spent most of his time pleasing his patron, or Wickham, who was willing to do anything to be in the higher class. Eventually, true love is the most powerful thing that makes Darcy and Elizabeth overcome their prejudice and social boundaries.
We wonder that social classes are still in existence in our world today, so we interview a few people.
I think social classes still exist today. It's not very expressed clearly, like you're that class, you're that class, you're that class, but we can tell about how people interact with each other, how they feel about themselves.
We can see from the rich to the poor, they have a different classes, and then each of them are treated differently, so I think it still do exist.
Gender equality as seen from the book Pride and Prejudice.
Gender equality is another issue that Jane Austen raises in the novel. This issue can be obviously seen in the whole of the book. As from the very beginning, Mrs. Bennet told her daughters that they would be impoverished if Mr. Bennet died before they could find rich and wealthy men to marry with. They would have nothing left, even their house. Gender equality in the Regency era was considerably different from today. All women had a lower status than men. They had no right to ownership of properties. All properties must be possessed by only men heirs. As we can see from this novel, Mr. Bennet's property was bequeathed to Mr. Collins, who is Bennet's cousin, because Mr. Bennet didn't have a son. Since men got everything better than women, then women had to look for getting married to young men of large fortune. Another scene the writer used to depict and emphasize an unfairness of gender is Elizabeth was talking to Charlotte that Mr. Collins had a right to occupy entire Mr. Bennet's property, including a piano chair, because actually the land was owned by Mr. Collins, not Mr. Bennet's daughter.
We ask question, do women today have the same level of gender equality as men have?
I don't think so because women still get different pays and sometimes like people judge women more for their behavior than they do men. So I think there's still a long way to go until women have like same kind of equality.
No, I think like women have more in for today because like in the past women are like less educated and they don't allow women to have good education and work, but now women can take a higher level in a bigger position.
Socialization as seen from the book Pride and Prejudice.
Socialization was very important in Jane Austen times. For young women, it was the only way of meeting new men or finding husband. Dancing was the way that unmarried men and women could talk or even touch each other. The story tells us that it was at the ball where Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth met. If the ball wasn't to be held, it was hardly to meet each other by chances. Mr. Darcy was not very popular at the ball because he was too proud of himself. He did not talk or dance to any other girl except the Bingley sisters. Everybody has prejudice against him, especially Mrs. Bennet, because none of her 5 daughters were asked to dance with him.
We ask question, do you think socializing activities like a meeting could cause rumors and gossips?
Yes, I think so, because I think when people get together, people tend to exaggerate stories, and this can cause people to start different judgments and like, I don't know how you say this, like cause judgments, like make up their own stories. Yes, I think so. Because I think that when people are hanging out and just talking about normal stuff, people often talk about other people and their friends, and so it can usually start gossip or rumors.
Marriage as seen from the book Pride and Prejudice.
Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth were a married couple by true love. At first, he proposed to her, but she refused, as he was too proud. Nevertheless, he loved her and proposed to her for the second time. She accepted it because she also loved him. Jane and Mr. Bingley were married by love as well. Most of them exchanged love at first sight. Mr. Bingley could not take his eye out of her. Unfortunately, he had to leave for London for a while. Soon after he came back, he went to Jane's house and proposed to her. Jane has no hesitation in accepting because she had never stopped loving him. Mr. Collins and Elizabeth were married by arrangement. Mr. Collins at first thought that he had everything that Elizabeth could not turn down his proposal. However, she refused because she did not have a feeling for him. Mr. Collins and Charlotte were married because of wealth. Not so long after Mr. Collins was refused by Elizabeth, Charlotte accepted because she did not have any choices. She needed to find a security for her life, and Mr. Collins has everything she needs. Therefore, she chose wealth over love. Lydia and Mr. Wickham were the couple whose marriage was caused by deception. There was no love nor sincerity in their relationship. They just want to marry to fulfill their personal needs.
We ask question, if someone likes you because you are rich, do you like that?
I definitely don't like it because I think he or she may not like who I really am. They care about only my money and they come for me only for the money. So we cannot get along for the long run for sure.
No, I would not like that because I think that I have a lot of other good qualities than just being rich. Not saying I am rich. If I was, that's how I would feel. But I think maybe some guys would think the opposite.
You have visualized from our documentary that Pride and Prejudice have never died and still exist in our world today. From social class ethic, upper class have pride, whereas the lower class people have prejudice against them. From gender equality ethic, men have pride because they have a higher position in our society than women, so women will have prejudice against men. From socializing ethic, socializing causes rumors and gossip. Obviously, pride and prejudice will show wrong communication of information.
And lastly, for marriages, especially marriage for wealth, shows pride and prejudice in the relationship. The rich will be proud of their wealth and look down upon the poor, so prejudice will fall on the poorer. The negative effect of pride and prejudice may cause people to be too proud and too overconfident. Therefore, they may take advantages on others whom they feel more inferior than themselves. Whereas prejudice may cause misunderstanding among people and may induce wrong decision making. However, we believe that pride and prejudice will fade through time by educating people to dare to change.